Hello. So, since there's a lot of you now, I thought I would share my whole testimony. I wrote it down because it's a lot, but I just wanted to go ahead and share that so y'all just know a little bit of my story. And yeah, I'm gonna try not to cry because I'm a crybaby and it's heavy, but it's okay if I cry. It's fine. It's okay. Well, I'm gonna try not to because it's hard for me to talk when I do. Okay, so my name is Hyacinth. I'm 25 and I'm from Texas. And as you know, I'm a writer and I like to write songs and sing. I just don't sing a lot in front of people because I get kind of shy about it, but I do sing. And I just have always loved talking about God through my writing. Ever since I was a little girl, my teachers have always said, oh, she's such a gifted writer. Like, they'd write that on my report cards. And I even had one teacher tell me, oh, she can write something like Harry Potter and become a millionaire. This still makes me laugh. But truly, I just want to share my words for God, to tell people about Jesus. And especially now that I'm older, after, my testimony you're about to hear, I really want to share them to help give hope to people and point them to Christ. Alright, so I grew up in a Christian household with both my biological dad and mom. And I have 4 siblings, 1 older brother and a little brother and 2 little sisters. But now I have 6 because now I have 2 stepsisters. But we grew up in a Christian household, though despite being Christian, we didn't really go to church a lot until I was about in middle school. But despite that, ever since I was a little girl, I've always had this relationship with God. And I'm not saying my family didn't, but I've always had this close relationship with God. Despite not going to church, I was just always reading my Bible and always talking to him, and I was just so curious about him. And I finally got baptized when I was 16, and I think that really marked like a turning point in my life with my relationship with Jesus. It was when I was a teenager. Life was getting a little rough for me personally, and God was really all I had at that time. So my home life, I grew up very financially blessed. We grew up in a big house because my dad is the most hardworking person I know. So we were very financially blessed. We never struggled, with not having food or anything. In fact, we were like very spoiled, and I wish I was aware, even though I was a little kid, but I really do wish I was aware because we were very spoiled. I didn't have like any reason to complain because, I had a bed to sleep in, a roof over my head, and food to eat, and new clothes all the time. I was so blessed and privileged that I couldn't acknowledge the issues within the atmosphere in the spiritual realm, where the enemy seeks to destroy families. To this day, I think my family is unaware, but kind of just refuses to acknowledge how toxic the atmosphere was in our house. And to this day, I know they think I'm dramatic and victimizing myself, which I always found odd because if I were lying, I don't think I would lie about being sad and depressed and anxious. I don't know who would want to identify with that narrative willingly. But yeah, I'm not sure how you can fake anxiety and depression anyway for years and years. And I feel really hesitant sharing this story because it feels fake. I almost feel like I'm being gaslit, like it wasn't that deep, but clearly God wants me to tell this story. Clearly what happened, because he wouldn't send thousands of people to be listening. So I do believe that God only opens a few people's eyes to see brokenness in the spiritual realm. I think that takes a very sensitive person. And I believe in my family, that was me, who he gifted to see that. So despite being fed and dressed, it didn't matter the words that were being spoken over us or the threats being made, because it was normal. And no one would ever say it was, word curses, and no one would ever say it was threats because it was just normal. So despite being spoiled with new clothes every weekend, I was being called stupid and useless and difficult to love. Everything the enemy knew would affect me until my adulthood was being spoken over me since I was a little girl. I've lost count of how many car rides I thought I would die in because the person driving would threaten to drive off a bridge, into a lake, or into a light pole. I was told many times by my mother that she wishes she aborted me, and I would have many nightmares about it. I was compared to my two sisters endlessly in every way you can imagine, which I believe is what caused my low self-esteem, my body dysmorphia, bad body image issues, my sense of not being good enough, not feeling beautiful, not dating. I've never been in a relationship to this day. Out of insecurity, the on and off eating disorder I've had since I was 13. These little comments to be more like my sisters and look like this and act like this hardwired me with self-hatred, which I think is one of the things I've struggled with the most in my life. And it didn't help that I was being told similar things at school, too. There was this specific group of girls, about the same 5 to 7 girls, who for years, from 5th to 10th grade, picked on me relentlessly. And to this day, I don't know why. Now that I'm older, I think it was out of jealousy because I was a very sweet girl. I wasn't popular in a cool way, but I was very well received by a lot of people. I did a lot of things. I was in a lot of clubs. I played basketball. I was a good student, so I think there was some kind of odd jealousy, even though I wasn't popular in like a cool way. But anyway, they hated my guts. They would call me ugly. They embarrassed me in front of boys they knew I had a crush on purpose, because these girls would pretend to be my friends, and I would open up to them because I'm an open book and I trust people way too easily, and they'd take advantage of me and go tell everyone my secrets. They would spread horrible rumors about me, awful rumors about me. They would try to destroy the very few friendships that I had, so I could just be isolated. And it got to a point where in high school they were texting me to kill myself, and I was considering it by then. Truly, my mental health was crippling from the emotional abuse at home, if we're calling it what it was, and the bullying at school. So when I was secretly setting dates and making plans to end my life, researching how I would do it, shutting down, withdrawing from society, my parents missed the signs. I would beg them to homeschool me for years to save me from the bullies, and I told them I wanted to die, but they brushed it off as being dramatic. And I will never forget standing on the staircase. I was about 15, and I told my mom that I was suicidal, and she told me to shut up, go ahead and do it, and that nobody would miss me. Luckily, I didn't have the guts to, and despite the meticulous fantasizing and planning about it, and almost in a sick way thinking about how guilty my bullies would feel and how my mom would feel just to get them back for like the suffering they put me through, I just couldn't do it. And I knew in my heart God had a bigger purpose for me. It wasn't until I was in 10th grade my parents finally pulled me out of high school to do online school because they got tired of me crying all the time, and I had enough evidence, like the text messages of being told to kill myself, that I think they had enough pity to take me out. So 11th grade, despite being alone, and I never got to experience prom or walk the stage or anything, it was the happiest year of my life, getting to sit alone in my house and not be tortured. That was until my parents got divorced, which I believe was the same year or the next year. The enemy now invited infidelity into our home, and it destroyed all the normalcy we knew, even though it was always toxic anyways. And that's a long story to get into, but basically I ended up leaving my dad's. My mom packed up a bunch of our stuff and we just left randomly one day. And I ended up not speaking to him for 2 years because I was brainwashed into thinking he was the enemy. Although he didn't do anything wrong, the infidelity was not because of him. And she was the one who treated me badly. My dad never really spoke anything bad over me. But that chaos was comfortable. And in a sick way, it felt like love, because despite every insult, an insincere apology always followed, and that was enough for me to stay. I was that desperate to feel loved and safe, even though it was fake. And I'd been convinced not only was my dad the bad guy, but my stepmom was too. And her and I are best friends today. But at the time, my heart was so hardened, I truly believed I'd never know her, and I thought my dad would never even walk me down the aisle at my wedding. I was at the mercy of my mother's narcissistic narrative, Being isolated with her from the ages of 17 to 19 made the emotional abuse harsher and the suicidal thoughts worse. I truly did think I was going to kill myself, and it was the only way out. My view of God got blurred too, as she would tell me even God knows I'm an awful daughter, and once told me I was the one mistake God made, and that haunted me for years, and sometimes I still think about it. The enemy stole my father, he hardened my heart towards my stepmom, and even strained my relationship with Jesus because I was convinced God saw me how my mother did, a disappointing, burdensome, unlovable failure. I was still close with my siblings, but what bothered me was my mom never treated them how she treated me. Thank God, I would never wish that upon them. But it bothered me, and to this day it kind of hurts because they don't believe what she did because she didn't really do it in front of them. They didn't believe me when I would say, Mom's being mean. So I was so alone. It was like I was invisible. And when no one believes you, nobody comforts you. So without anyone to comfort me, it further fueled my desire to die. Finally, when I was 20, I packed up my suitcase secretly in the middle of the day and I called my dad, who I hadn't spoken to in forever, to come get me. I sat in the grass at the park crying with my suitcase. And that's when his truck that I hadn't sat in 2 years, or more than that, pulled up. And he told me in the car that he prayed for me every day for the last 2 years to come home. And I couldn't believe it because I thought he gave up on me. And I was so grateful in that moment I didn't end my life because I would have went to heaven thinking he hated me. I was living in a lie for years and I couldn't even call it what it was, abuse, because it was all I'd ever known, and I was just taught that I'm being dramatic and it's just discipline and it's not abuse, but that is exactly what it was. My life changed forever for the better once I moved in with my dad and stepmom. I finally felt like I had a mom who loved me, who understood me, and who would hug me and go to war and pray for me. And to this day, it still feels like a dream to have her and to have a relationship with my dad again. This was the beginning of being the girl God always intended for me to be. I couldn't have ever imagined being so at peace the way that I am now and taken care of in my heart for once. So now at 25, I'm slowly reconciling my relationship with my biological mother because I know that God calls us to forgive. And with Jesus, I'm trying to forgive her because I know she went through things as a child that were awful that she did not deserve. And so I have empathy because you could argue some of the things she went through were worse than what happened to me. My bitterness does creep in though, in moments where I feel insecure and I'm hyper aware. I wouldn't feel that way had my mother not treated me that way. I wouldn't have stage fright and hate talking in front of people and have anxiety if I wasn't told all the time I can't sing, I'm stupid, I'm shy. If I just had a loving mom, I wouldn't act the way that I do, so that causes a lot of bitterness sometimes. I wouldn't hate my appearance if she didn't tell me to change everything about myself. I wouldn't be scared of intimacy and romantic relationships and friendships if she didn't tell me how unlovable I am. I naturally assume I'm going to disappoint everyone who says they love me because I always have, which makes me shut them out or at least distance myself, and they don't deserve that. If I make a mistake, I think everyone's thinking she's stupid. When I struggle with anxiety, I truly believe my most godly friends are gossiping about me and saying how much of a coward I am. And I believe my mentors who love me have given up on me because I'm just an anxious, lost cause not worth believing in anymore. I'm very much still brokenhearted, and honestly, I may always be to some degree. However, my broken heart isn't bleeding in my hands anymore because I've placed it in the palms of Jesus, and he knows a thing or two about bleeding at the hands of abuse. I'm finally beginning to see how God's using me now. And I always told others he works all things together for the good of those who love him, but I'm only just now seeing that that's also true for myself. I've noticed how untrue my view of myself has been my whole life. I feel shameful when I tell my story, but then people call it inspiring. I feel weak when I admit I'm struggling, but then people tell me I'm strong. This is truly only the beginning of my breakthrough. I truly believe that. And actually, the Bible verse of my life God assigned to me is Esther 4:14, which says, For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows that you've come to your royal position for such a time as this?" This prophetic verse spoken over my life is starting to make sense. Because, like Esther, I was a little girl who was looked down upon, persecuted, picked apart, and attacked by the enemy ruthlessly. But God saw me this whole time, and he said, "I'm chosen." I don't know why, but he did. I'm royalty by default because I'm a child of God, and you are too. Relief and deliverance is slowly becoming mine, and I believe God's going to bring nations before me, not for me to save them like some queen, because I'm not a savior, but through my story and my redemption of how I was saved, my Savior, Jesus Christ, will be made known. And I don't want to speak too soon, in case it doesn't happen, but I like to think it's not a coincidence that my first video sharing part of my story has thousands of views. And I saw YouTube shows, they were from multiple nations. I saw there were thousands of views from people all around the world hearing my story. People in America, Canada, the UK, Australia, South Korea, the Philippines, Africa. I was shocked. I didn't even know I can tell you that. I was like, oh wow. It was amazing. So I will continue to share my words because I was made for such a time as this. And I believe this is what God meant when he prophesied over me last year through a stranger, who is now my best friend, that I would sing to the nations and my words will reach millions of people. I was praying, I closed my eyes, and in my head I said, "God, if you're going to use me in the music industry, if my words are going to help people, send someone to pray for me right now." Within 4 seconds, a stranger at the time put her hand on my shoulder and said that. And I like to believe this right now is what God was talking about all along. So I'm so grateful for each of you listening, and I pray with all of my heart my story blesses you, but most of all gives you hope that you're on earth for a reason. Please do not end your life. Do not internalize the lies of the enemy, and I know it's not easy when everyone around you saying it, and it's so hard to listen to God in the noise, but please do not end your life. Because what God says of you is true. And I need you to look at me and see what God did for me. And he doesn't love or favor me any more than he does you. You have a purpose. You are so loved. You are so needed on this earth. And you too were made for such a time as this. So that was my testimony. I'm so proud that I didn't cry. But thank you so much for listening. Y'all can always reach out to me through Instagram messages or my email, and I would love to talk to you, and I'm just so grateful you're here. So thank you so much, and God bless you.